Welcome to Impact Signals, social impact at the scale of AI. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Sarah.
It's Wednesday, March 11th, 2026, and this is episode 27. Today, we're in the field. AI systems that aren't concepts, aren't pilots, aren't white papers. They're running. 38 million Indian farmers got monsoon forecasts from an AI system last year. A famine early warning tool just went live for 43 countries. And 2 back-to-back stories from the Caribbean showing real-world readiness being built before hurricane season opens. Let's start in India. Researchers just published a paper on arXiv, out Monday, documenting an AI-powered monsoon onset forecasting system that was deployed operationally in 2025. Through a government-led program, it reached 38 million farmers.
And what makes this interesting is the design philosophy. Most forecast systems give you a single date. Monsoon arrives June 14th. This one produces probability distributions tailored to decision-making, because a smallholder farmer with 2 acres of rice doesn't need the same information as a large agricultural operation hedging investments. The system asks, what does this farmer need to know, given what choices are actually available to them?
Right. The research team blended AI weather prediction models with what they call an evolving farmer expectations model, Bayesian inference applied to historical observations, predicting time-varying probabilities of first rainfall events throughout the entire season, not just a date, a probability landscape.
And in 2025, it worked. The system skillfully predicted an early summer anomalous dry period that affected planting decisions across India. Farmers with access to that forecast could hold off on inputs until the signal clarified. That's the actionable edge, not just accuracy, but timing and framing.
For practitioners thinking about climate adaptation tools, the takeaway here is method, not just outcome. The decision theory framework the paper introduces, designing forecasts around heterogeneous user circumstances, is directly applicable to other tropical countries navigating monsoon and rainy season agriculture. If your team is building anticipatory action systems in East Africa or Southeast Asia, this framework is worth reading closely. Story 2. Famine Early Warning. An independent researcher published a paper this week on a system called CERES, Calibrated Early Warning and Risk Estimation System. It generates 90-day ahead probability estimates of acute food insecurity across 43 high-risk countries, updated weekly, open access, free.
The architecture is what stands out here. CERES fuses 6 data streams simultaneously: precipitation anomalies from CHIRPS, vegetation indices from MODIS, conflict event data from ACLED, IPC phase classifications, food consumption scores from WFP, and cereal price indices from FAO and WFP, all flowing into a logistic scoring model that produces 2,000 probability draws per country per week.
To be clear on the outputs, this isn't just a red flag alert. It outputs IPC Phase 3 plus probability, Phase 4 plus probability, and Phase 5, famine, probability, at a 90-day horizon. So a country operations manager can look at Sudan, or Ethiopia, or Haiti, and see a probabilistic timeline, not just a binary warning.
What the author is claiming is a first in famine early warning, a system that's simultaneously probabilistic, open access, continuously running, machine-readable at the prediction level, and publicly committed to prospective verification. Every single prediction is cryptographically timestamped. You can audit CERES against IPC outcomes 90 days later. That accountability structure is genuinely new.
For humanitarian funding and programming teams, the 90-day lead time is critical. Pre-financing mechanisms, SURF funding triggers, WFP pre-positioning decisions, they all need that window. A system you can integrate into existing dashboards via machine-readable outputs, and that you can audit after the fact, removes 2 of the biggest barriers to institutional trust in AI early warning tools.
The live system is at ceres.northflow.no. It's not from a large institution. It's a solo researcher publishing openly, which is either a strength or a limitation depending on your organization's due diligence threshold. But the methodology is rigorous, and the verification commitment means its track record will either build or undermine trust in public view.
Moving to the Caribbean, and we have 2 stories today, both pointing to the same thing. The region is doing real preparedness work before June 1st. UNESCO, working with Jamaica Flying Labs and the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, HOT, ran a training in Kingston for media professionals and disaster preparedness officials. Drones, GIS, AI tools for situational awareness. The goal? Build capacity in media as a frontline information asset during disasters.
The Caribbean context matters here. This is among the most disaster-prone regions on the planet. Small island developing states, SIDS, face hurricanes, flooding, and climate shocks with limited communications infrastructure and thin response capacity. When a disaster hits, the first hours are often information voids. Journalists and disaster officials who know how to fly UAVs and run GIS analyses are plugging that void in real time.
The training is specifically about equipping people to generate high-resolution aerial imagery and geospatial data, the kind of information that goes into HOT's OpenStreetMap base layer and feeds damage assessment systems. Journalists become data producers, not just information consumers.
And Jamaica Flying Labs running this alongside HOT is a model worth noting. Both organizations are deeply embedded in the regional ecosystem, not parachuting in to train and leave. That local anchor is the difference between a certification people file away and operational capacity that gets used when the storm comes.
The companion story is the WFP Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean and CDEMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. They held a 5-day regional emergency logistics coordination exercise in Barbados from February 2nd through 6th. The exercise summary was officially published this week.
What that exercise is doing is stress testing the coordination layer. When a Category 4 storm hits a SID like Dominica, the failure mode isn't usually supplies, it's logistics coordination. Who has authority to move goods across customs? Which airstrip is operational? Which private sector partners have pre-committed warehouse access? Those conversations are brutal to have in the first 48 hours of a response. An exercise in February means you've already had them.
The exercise brought together national disaster agencies, government institutions, private sector partners, and humanitarian organizations across the Caribbean, multi-sector by design. The outcome is validated roles and responsibilities, a coordination framework that's been tested before it's needed.
Together, stories 3 and 4 are a coherent picture of Caribbean readiness investment happening right now, 3 months before hurricane season opens. Media professionals who can document disasters, and logistics frameworks pre-tested under simulated conditions. That's how you build a resilient response ecosystem.
Our final story today takes a step back from field deployments and asks a harder question. If the goal is to scale AI for social impact across the global south, what's the actual infrastructure reality on the ground? The IMF's AI Preparedness Index, a dataset that researchers and practitioners are finally starting to engage seriously, reveals a structural gap the ICT4D community has been reluctant to name clearly. Average index scores: 0.68 for advanced economies, 0.46 for emerging markets, 0.32 for low-income countries. The places where AI could do the most good are the least prepared to absorb it.
And the numbers underneath that headline are the operational story. In sub-Saharan Africa, 81% of the population lives within mobile broadband coverage, but only 30% actually use the internet. That's a 50-point gap between signal and access. Mobile data costs 20% of per capita income there versus 1% in North America. You can't deploy an AI clinical decision support tool that requires a data connection when the connection costs a fifth of what your users earn.
There's also the school electricity problem. Only 22% of primary schools in sub-Saharan Africa have electricity. Tablet-based AI education tools assume charging access that doesn't exist. And the human capital pipeline is measured in decades. Africa needs 23 million additional STEM graduates by 2030 to meet anticipated demand. At current graduation rates, that takes 150 years.
What the IMF Index does for practitioners is give you country-level numbers to design against, not argue around. The gap between mobile coverage and internet use tells you exactly how much offline-first functionality your AI tool requires. The data costs tell you your bandwidth budget. The electricity access numbers tell you your charging infrastructure assumptions.
The framing that stands out from the ICTworks analysis: we're building AI castles on digital sand. If practitioners don't design explicitly for these structural realities, offline modes, local caching, low bandwidth interfaces, community mesh networks, tools that test beautifully in a Nairobi office will fail invisibly in the communities they're supposed to serve.
This is why the Caribbean training story and the India Monsoon story matter together. Both deployments accounted for infrastructure constraints in their design. The Monsoon system is probabilistic because farmers have uncertain connectivity and must act on best available information. The UNESCO training uses drones, edge devices, not centralized AI platforms. Designing for the gap isn't theoretical. It's what makes field deployment actually work.
Before we close, on your radar, HNPW 2026, the Humanitarian Networks and Partnerships Weeks, is in its final in-person days in Geneva right now through March 12th. It's worth watching the OCHA UNDP Connecting Business Initiative sessions for any announcements on AI-enabled private sector coordination frameworks. And June 1st starts the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season, a date that gives the Caribbean preparedness stories we covered today a clear operational deadline. That's Impact Signals for Wednesday, March 11th, 2026. If this briefing is useful, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out at impactsignals.ai and share it with someone working in the field.
Stay ready.